morning we're going to be going on, I guess this is week 3. I wasn't here last week. Kimberly and I were ministering at Highway Church over in Broomfield, so it's good to be back home. But this week we're going to be week 3 of Back to the Start, and we're going to be teaching on a subject, the subject of integrity. So, how many of you know that integrity is something that is kind of lacking in today's society?
Yeah.
So, if we could have, the first verse I'm going to go over is Matthew 5:37. In the King James, it says, well, we'll just read it in NIV. All you need to simply say is yes or no. Anything beyond this comes from the evil one. The New King James says, let your yes be yes and your no be no. So, in other words, do what you say you're going to do. Integrity stems from the Latin word integer. You probably remember that from math class, because the integer is a whole number. Integer is a whole number, and that means, integer in Latin means whole or complete. So integrity requires an inner sense of wholeness and consistency of character. When you are a person of integrity, people should be able to visibly see it through your actions, words, decisions, methods, and outcomes. When you are whole and consistent, there is only one you. There's not the work you, the school you, the church you. There's only one you. You bring the same you wherever you are, regardless of the circumstances. You don't leave parts of yourself behind. You don't have work you, family you, you're you all the time. Thank you. She knows I sweat a lot. C.S. Lewis says, his quote is, integrity is doing right even when no one is looking. So it's what you do when you're not going to get applause, when you're not going to get an attaboy, but you do the right thing because it's the right thing. Dwight Eisenhower, 34th president, said, in order to be a leader, a man must have followers. And to have followers, a man must have their confidence. Hence, the supreme quality of a leader is unquestionably integrity. Without it, no real success is possible, no matter whether it is in a section game, on a football field, in an army, or in an office. If a man's associates find him guilty of phoniness, if they find that he lacks integrity, he will fail. His teachings and actions must square with each other. The first great need, therefore, is integrity and high purpose. The Bible has a lot to say about integrity, especially in the book of Proverbs. Let's go to Proverbs 2:7. He stores up sound wisdom for the upright. He is a shield to those who walk in integrity. I'm going to go through these real quick so you can just take them down. We don't have to go to all of them. Proverbs 10:9. He who walks in integrity walks securely, but he who perverts his ways will be found out. Proverbs 11:3. The integrity of the upright will guide them, but the crookedness of the treacherous will destroy them. Proverbs 19:1. Better is a poor man who walks in his integrity than one who is perverse in speech and is a fool. Proverbs 27. A righteous man who walks in his integrity, how blessed are his sons after him. And finally, Proverbs 28:6. Better is the poor who walks in integrity than he who is crooked, though he be rich. So I'm going to give you 3 examples today of people who walked in integrity and how God blessed them. The first one is Joseph. How many of you know the story of Joseph? If not, I'll give a quick rundown. Joseph was at the time the youngest son of Jacob, also called Israel. And Joseph was his father's favorite because he was the son of his old age. And he gave Joseph this special coat made of many colors. And Joseph knew that he was his dad's favorite and kind of rubbed it in his brother's face a little bit because he didn't use a lot of wisdom because God gave him a dream that all of his brothers were going to be bowing down to him, and he told them that, and they thought he was a little bit too big for his britches, so they threw him in a pit, put blood on his coat, showed it to his dad, told his dad that he'd been killed by wild animals. But in reality, they sold him to slave traders, and he was taken to Egypt. So, Joseph goes to Egypt, and he's bought by a man named Potiphar. And we pick up the story in Genesis 39, verses 2 through 6. And the Lord was with Joseph, and he was a successful man, and he was in the house of his master, the Egyptian. And his master saw that the Lord was with him, and that the Lord made all he did to prosper in his hand. So Joseph found favor in his sight and served him. Then he made him the overseer of his house and all that he put under his authority. So it was from the time that he had made him overseer of his house that all he had and all that he had, that the Lord blessed the Egyptian's household for Joseph's sake. And the blessing of the Lord was on all that he had in the house and in the field. Thus he left all that he had in Joseph's hand and did not know what he had except for the bread which he ate. He so trusted Joseph, he didn't even look at the books. He didn't know what he had except what the bread that he was being served at his table, because Joseph took care of all of his affairs. So Joseph caught the eye of Potiphar's wife, and she wanted to be with him. But Joseph said, "This is an evil thing in the sight of the Lord." Kept his integrity. And then she was trying to coax him to come to bed with her. She grabbed his coat, and he ran out. So then she goes to her husband with Joseph's coat and said, "He tried to rape me." So then Potiphar threw Joseph in prison. Because Joseph kept his integrity, he was punished. But verse 21 of chapter 39, but the Lord was with Joseph and showed him mercy, and he gave him favor in the sight of the keeper of the prison. So even when he was thrown into prison, God gave him favor. And the keeper of the prison committed to Joseph's hand all the prisoners who were in the prison. Whatever they did there, it was his doing. The keeper of the prison did not look into anything that was under Joseph's authority, because the Lord was with him, and whatever he did, the Lord made it to prosper. So then he meets a couple of guys there, and they have a dream. The baker, and there's one other, the butler. And he predicts what's going to happen to them. That both of them are going to be released. One of them is going to be restored to his position. The other one's going to be executed. And that comes to pass. Joseph told the one that was going to be restored, the butler, "Remember me when you go back." Well, he didn't remember him until 2 years later. So Joseph is in prison for 2 years. And Pharaoh, ruler of Egypt, has a dream. And in this dream, these cows come out of the Nile. There's 7 fat cows and 7 skinny cows. And the skinny cows eat the fat cows. And this dream kind of confused Pharaoh, made him really troubled. So when Pharaoh told his dream, the butler's like, I know someone who can interpret this. This guy that I was in the pen with, he can do this. Call him up. So he called Joseph up. And Joseph told him that what the dream meant. That there were going to be 7 good years. That's what the fat cows represented. And then there were going to be 7 lean years. But the lean years were going to overtake the good years. So they needed to, God gave Joseph wisdom to tell him they needed to prepare during those fat years and put back. They're going to have bumper crops. They're going to have more than they can use. So they need to put some aside, because when the 7 years of famine comes, there's going to be starvation. So they needed to be prepared. So Pharaoh, in 41, Genesis chapter 41, verses 37 through 35 said, so the advice was good in the eyes of Pharaoh, and in the eyes of all his servants. And Pharaoh said to his servants, can we find such a one as this, a man in whom is the Spirit of God? Then Pharaoh said to Joseph, inasmuch as God has shown you all this, there is no one as discerning and wise as you. You shall be over my house, and all my people shall be ruled by according to your word. Only in regard to the throne will I be greater than you. And Pharaoh said to Joseph, see that I have set you over all the land of Egypt. Then Pharaoh took his signet ring off of his hand and put it on Joseph's hand, and he clothed him in garments of fine linen, put a gold chain around his neck, and he had him ride in the second chariot which he had. And they cried out before him, bowed the knee. So he set him over all the land of Egypt. Pharaoh also said to Joseph, I am Pharaoh, and without your consent, no man may lift his hand or foot in all the land of Egypt. And Pharaoh called Joseph's name Zaphnath-Paneah, and he gave him a wife, Asenath, the daughter of Potiphar, priest of On. So Joseph went out over all the land of Egypt. Because Joseph kept his integrity all that time, God put him second in command to the most powerful nation on earth at the time. Egypt was a force to be reckoned with in the ancient world. They had the land, they had the money, they had the army. No one messed with Egypt. And God set him over the land of Egypt, and only Pharaoh had more power than him. So, they had the 7 good years, and Joseph had them put back a portion of each crop into storehouses, and then the famine came. And it was so bad that it reached the whole world, basically, the known world at that time. And here comes Joseph's brothers to get food, all the way from Canaan, come down to Egypt. And so Joseph saw them. They didn't recognize him, because it had been, plenty of years had gone by at this time. And he was dressed as an Egyptian, I'm sure. So they didn't recognize him, but he recognized his brothers. And so Joseph called them out. He decided he was going to play with them a little bit because of what they did to him. And so he said, you guys are spies. And they're like, no, we're not spies. They're like, well, who's your father? And they're like, Jacob's our father, blah, blah, blah. They're like, so he was just kind of toying with them. And he said, well, I'm going to hold one of your brothers ransom until you bring me back your youngest brother. And they're like, oh my gosh. Our dad really freaked out when Joseph died. When Joseph was sold, we told him he died. And he's going to have a heart attack once we come back and we don't have one brother, and we tell him we're going to have to bring Benjamin, who's now his favorite. So they brought back Benjamin. And he was getting ready to let them go. He brought them in. They had a feast, all this kind of stuff. He still hadn't told them who he was. And so he instructed his servants to put a silver cup, the cup that Benjamin was drinking out of at the feast, into his bag of grain. And so he instructed them to inspect all of their stuff as they were leaving, and they found this cup. And then they're really freaking out. What's going on? So Joseph brought them back in, and in Genesis 45, verses 1 through 8, they're interrogating them. His people are interrogating them, and Joseph's standing behind this curtain, kind of listening to this thing going on. They're really losing it because they're being interrogated by the Pharaoh's people. And he said, "Then Joseph could not restrain himself before all those who stood by him, and he cried out, 'Make everyone go out from the room.' And no one stood with him while Joseph made himself known to his brothers. And he wept aloud, and the Egyptians and the house of Pharaoh heard it. Then Joseph said to his brothers, 'I am Joseph. Does my father still live?' But his brothers could not answer him, for they were dismayed in his presence. And Joseph said to his brothers, 'Please come near me.' So they came near him. Then he said, 'I am Joseph your brother, whom you sold into Egypt. But now do not therefore be grieved or angry with yourselves, because you sold me here. For God sent me here before you to preserve life. For these 2 years the famine has been in the land, and there are still 5 years in which there will be neither plowing nor harvesting. And God sent me before you to preserve a posterity for you in the earth, and to save your lives by a great deliverance. So now it was not you who sent me here, but God. And he has made me a father to Pharaoh, and lord of all his house, and a ruler throughout the land of Egypt.'" So then he tells them to bring back his father and all of everybody, and we're going to make a place for them in Egypt. So they bring them all back, and then Jacob dies. So then the brothers are like, "Well, we think that he was just only doing this while Dad was alive. So now that Dad's dead, he's going to put us in prison for what we did to him." Perhaps Joseph will hate us and may actually repay us for all the evil that we did to him. So they sent messengers to Joseph, saying, "Before your father died, he commanded, saying, 'Thus you shall say to Joseph, I beg you, please forgive the trespass of your brothers and their sin, for they did evil to you. Now please forgive the trespass of the servants of the God of your father.' And Joseph wept when they spoke to him. Then his brothers also went and fell down before his face, and they said, 'Behold, we're your servants.' And Joseph said to them, 'Do not be afraid, for am I in the place of God? But as for you, you meant evil against me, but God meant it for good, in order to bring about, as it is this day, to save many people's lives. Now therefore, don't be afraid. I will provide for you and your little ones.'" And he comes. So let me pick up another mic here. Is this one on? Okay. So he comforted them and spoke kindly to them. So we see that Joseph, because of his integrity, he did what was right in the eyes of God. God promoted him. So the second example that I want to bring to you is Daniel. Now Daniel, everybody knows the story of Daniel and the lion's den, right? Daniel was a captive from the land of Judah. So after Solomon died, David's son, Israel split into two kingdoms, Israel and Judah. And Israel was conquered because they had a series of really evil kings. And then eventually, Judah was conquered. And everybody there was taken into slavery and taken to Babylon by Nebuchadnezzar. So, Daniel was one of the ones that was taken into captive, along with Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, the three Hebrew children that were put into the fiery furnace. And Daniel kept his integrity as well. So after Nebuchadnezzar died, his grandson took over, Belshazzar, and he was so evil that a hand appeared out of nowhere and wrote in fire on the wall that you have been found, you have been weighed in yes, hallelujah, that you have been weighed in the balances and found wanting, and your kingdom will be ripped from you this night. So later that night, Babylon was overtaken by the Persians and the Medes. And then we see that Darius, the Mede, was the conqueror of Babylon. And in Daniel 6, it said, it pleased Darius to set over the kingdom 120 satraps to be over the whole kingdom, and over these 3 governors, of whom Daniel was one, that the satraps may give account to them, so that the king would suffer no loss. Then this Daniel distinguished himself above the governors and satraps, because an excellent spirit was within him. And the king gave thought to setting him over the whole realm. So he became Darius's favorite. So the governors and the satraps sought to find some charge against Daniel concerning the kingdom. They wanted to find some dirt on him. So they went digging. But they could find no charge or fault, because he was faithful. Nor was there any error or fault found in him. Then these men said, we shall not find any charge against Daniel unless we find it against him concerning the law of his God. And that's what they did. They came up with this law that nobody for, I think it was 30 days, should pray to anybody except Darius. No other gods can get prayed to. And they knew that Daniel prayed 3 times a day. So they these trumped up charges. They brought Daniel in. Oh, we caught him praying to his God. And when Darius found this out, he was kind of mad that he'd been tricked by these guys, because they were weasels. And so that's why he got thrown into the lion's den. But because he was faithful, God shut the mouths of the lions. Because he didn't cave in and served his God, still prayed to his God. He had an excellent spirit. God shut the mouths of the lions. He survived the lion's den, which at that time was a death sentence, because they didn't feed the lions that much. So when they threw somebody in there, they were lion food. So it was a miracle that he kept them. So then after the king took Daniel out, he threw the governors in, so that the kiddies would have something to eat. And because he was not really happy that they had tricked him into punishing Daniel. The last example that I want to go over with you is a guy called Jesus of Nazareth.
Amen.
In his 33 and a half years here on earth, he only did what the Father told him to do. He left eternity, because God dwells outside of the bounds of time. He left eternity and stepped into time on this earth, not as a king, but as the son of a carpenter. Was born in a stable and got put into a feeding trough for his crib. Then he submitted himself for you and me to death. And not just any death, but death on the cross. And I don't think we understand what crucifixion was like, because we've been so far removed from it. It was created by the Assyrians to punish their enemies, and it was perfected by the Romans. First, they would scourge you with whips that had bone, pieces of metal, tied into the leather, so that it just ripped your back apart. And if you survived that, then you got nailed to a cross. They put a nail through your wrist, and anyone who's had carpal tunnel, the median nerve that goes down the back of your arm and comes through the carpal tunnel right there, it was meant to crush that nerve. The very term excruciating came from crucifixion. Excruciating means from the cross. And you were left there to suffocate because your arms were outstretched and you had to push yourself up to exhale. Sometimes they were left there for days. In the case of the Bible, when Jesus was crucified, they went around breaking people's legs so that they would die before the Passover, because it was a holy day coming up. So when they broke your legs, you couldn't push up anymore, so you suffocated. So he went through that. He told God in the Garden of Gethsemane, "If it be thy will, take this cup from me." He knew what was coming. He knew what crucifixion was all about. But he said, "Nevertheless, not my will, but yours be done." And Paul says in Philippians, because of his obedience in submitting to death, even the death of the cross, God has highly exalted Jesus. That at the name of Jesus, every knee will bow. Amen. And every tongue confess that Jesus Christ is Lord, to the glory of God the Father. Amen. Yeah, I'd say you missed an opportunity to clap right there. He was faithful. In Revelation 19, the Apostle John saw heaven open. He said, "I saw heaven standing open, and there before me was a white horse, whose rider is called Faithful and True. And with justice he judges and wages war. His eyes are like blazing fire, and on his head are many crowns. And he has a name which is above every name." And he has a name written on him. Go back for just a second. I got ahead of myself. He has a name written on him that no one knows but he himself. He's dressed in a robe dipped in blood, and his name is the Word of God. The armies of heaven were following him, riding on white horses and dressed in fine linen, white and clean.
Coming out of his mouth is a sharp sword with which he will strike down the nations. He will rule them with an iron scepter. He treads the winepress of the fury of the wrath of God Almighty. And on his robe and on his thigh, he has written, King of Kings and Lord of Lords. He left this earth. He left this earth as a servant. He was born as a baby, a little innocent baby in a cradle, the feed trough, in a stable. But when he comes back next time, his eyes are going to blaze like fire. And he won't be messing around next time. You guys think? So I just want everyone to just kind of let that absorb into you. When we walk in integrity, when we walk, let our yes be yes and let our no be no. We're going to establish relationships with people. And we want those relationships to bring people closer to the one whose name is faithful and true. And the only way that we're going to be able to do that is by letting the Holy Spirit change us. It's by His Spirit. The whole Old Testament is all about the law. And it's all about rules and regulations. And don't do this and do that. Don't eat this, don't eat that. But Jesus came to change that. Because He proved, the Old Testament, it says, was a schoolmaster to prove that you can't do it on your own. Now, back in the Old Testament, the Spirit of God would come upon men. Men like Elijah and Elisha. And they were able to do incredible things when the Spirit came upon them. Samson. But now, the Spirit of God dwells inside of us. He dwells inside of us. And He, if you trust in Him, He will make it possible for you to do incredible things. Not in your own power, but by the Spirit of God. Jesus said that if you abide in me and my words abide in you, the works that I have done, you will do also. And even greater works than these, because I go to my Father in heaven. What kind of works did Jesus do when He was here? Well, He walked on water. He raised the dead. He healed the lame, healed the blind, healed the deaf. Couldn't even go to a funeral without raising the person who was dead out of the casket. And what did the apostles do after he ascended into heaven? They had so much of the Spirit of God that when they walked down the street, just their shadow passing over people, they would be healed. What's stopping us? What's stopping us? We should be Supermen. But so many people said that all died when the apostles died. Let me tell you something. You were made for the supernatural. That's why the devil has such copy. Why do you think psychic hotlines and all that is so popular? Because people crave the supernatural. And in most churches, they're not getting it. But it's time, folks, for the supernatural to be back in our midst. Because greater is He who is in me than he that is in the world.
intercession on our behalf. So with every head bowed and every eye closed, if there's anybody here who doesn't know this Jesus, the wave walker, the one who breathed and stars came out of his mouth, I want you to raise your hand if you don't know him and you want to. If you have served him previously but have walked away, I want to give you the chance to come back into relationship with him. Because that's the only thing that's going to get you through those gates. It's not how good you are, how good you've been, how many little old ladies you've helped across the street. It's only if you have a relationship with Jesus of Nazareth and your name is written in the Lamb's Book of Life. Thank you, Jesus. Thank you, Jesus. I thank you, Father, that you are faithful and true. That you are complete. You are the very definition of integrity. That it says that Jesus Christ is the same yesterday, today, and forever. You are integrity. And Father, as we put our trust in you, give us the strength, God, to be whole, to be of one person. We don't have a work person, we don't have a church person and a school person, but we are one person, and we are a light to those that are around us, reflecting your glory so that they see you in us, God. God, I thank you for everyone under the sound of my voice. I thank God that you're going to speak to them this week. God, and give them strength to be people of integrity, to be people of character, God. And that people would see them and see that there's something different about them. And God, and be drawn